Hello, thank you for being here at Zooline Uncut. I'm going to try and finally understand what Ezekiel 25 really means about God's judgment. The book of Ezekiel is one of the most fascinating and complex books in the Bible, and chapter 25 is a passage that has sparked a lot of debate. Ezekiel was a prophet who lived during a time of great turmoil, and his messages were often warnings of impending judgment. Chapter 25 in particular stands out because it contains a series of prophecies against several nations. Many people struggle with this passage because it seems to portray God as being vengeful or even cruel. It's hard to reconcile this with other parts of the Bible that describe God as loving and merciful. For instance, we're told that God is a God of love who desires all people to be saved. So when we read passages like Ezekiel 25, where God seems to be announcing judgment on various nations, it can be tough to understand. This struggle is compounded by the fact that Ezekiel 25 appears to be quite graphic, with God pronouncing doom on these nations. The language used is very strong, which can lead to the impression that God is somehow bloodthirsty or arbitrary in his judgments. But is that really what's going on here? The more I study this passage, the more I realize that there's more to it than meets the eye. The key to understanding Ezekiel 25 lies in understanding the historical context and the actions of the nations being addressed. The nations mentioned, Ammon, Moab, Edom, and Philistia, were all neighboring countries that had a history of hostility towards Israel. They had repeatedly shown themselves to be enemies of God's people, often rejoicing in their suffering or even actively working against them. For example, the Edomites had a long history of conflict with Israel, and their actions were marked by significant violence and pride. God's judgment on these nations wasn't arbitrary. It was a response to their actions. They had consistently demonstrated their rejection of God's people and, by extension, God himself. Their pride and hostility had reached a point where God was compelled to act. At its core, Ezekiel 25 is about God's justice, sovereignty, and glory. It's about a God who holds nations accountable for their actions and reveals his power to those who don't know him. This passage shows us that God's judgments are not based on personal whims, but are grounded in his character and the actions of humanity. The core meaning of God's judgment in Ezekiel 25 is not about cruelty, but about justice. It's about a God who is sovereign over all nations and demands that they acknowledge him. So the key takeaway from Ezekiel 25 is that it's not about a vengeful God, but about a just God who holds nations accountable and reveals his power. If you've been struggling to understand Ezekiel 25 or have your own insights, share them with us in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more biblical insights and deeper dives into scripture.
In the shadows of tomorrow, legends are forged. Advanced armor, ancient blade. When technology meets tradition, a new kind of warrior emerges, ready to face whatever comes next.
They didn't believe in us. God did.